Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable. I'm Sarah Vantine here with Ted Ings, and we have a special guest with us today, Steve Greenfield.
It's good to be here. Thank you both for having me.
I don't think there's anybody more in the know, Sarah, than Steve Greenfield as what's happening in our industry in this year. And Steve, welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable.
Well, Ted, as always, it's a pleasure being back. I don't know how many times it's been now, but I'll always appreciate the thought partnership, and it's just a pleasure being here.
Fascinating to see a lot of the things that you've gotten into and a lot of the conversations that have come as a result of that, Steve. And what a great place to be, automotive, in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, coming off of COVID here, I mean, it has been a roller coaster ride, many surprises, but yeah, there's no industry I would rather be in. There's never a dull moment.
Well, Steve, this is really exciting to be in the first few weeks of 2024, and a lot of dealers are doing reflection right now, thinking about what happened in 2023. So looking back at the automotive industry in 2023, what would you say were the biggest headline items?
Yeah, so I think a few that I would think come to mind. You know, one maybe the biggest being sort of the EV slowdown, and you know, as we've seen even through January here, last year was a good year. About 8% of new vehicle sales were EVs, plug-in EVs. But you know that the pace of growth has slowed right at the time that a lot of these legacy automakers are bringing new models online. So I suspect that'll continue. But we did see that pace start to slow down. And the other thing to keep in mind is it really is a tale of two cities, right? Tesla closed the year at about 60% of all EV sales. So it's hard to generalize and say we hit 8% when Tesla's 60% of that. It's a long tail of the legacy automakers that are just dipping their toe into EV sales that have really started to feel the pain of this, right? And I think Ford last year lost something like $37,000 per new EV sold, and should end the year at about a $4.5 billion loss in their EV division. So it's hard to know when these legacy automakers that are just getting started are going to ever turn a profit on these EVs overall. So EVs was a big one. I think a second one, Sarah, was the UAW, the victory for the UAW. I mean, that was a huge win for the UAW last year. These were the richest contracts that they'd seen since 1960. I had seen someone cite that the wage increases over the 4 years totaled more than the workers received in the past 22 years. And then, they quickly turned their sights to non-unionized factories like Toyota, like Tesla, et cetera, who reacted almost immediately by increasing their labor rates, right? So even though these were non-unionized folks, I mean, the costs have gone up across the industry for labor overall, which is going to trickle down into like higher vehicle prices overall and probably lower margins for the OEMs in general. So we'll see how the rest of that plays out over the course of 2024. But that was a big news item. I would say that 2023 was probably, from my mind, the year of Elon Musk. You couldn't pick up any media without seeing some news, good or bad, a lot of bad about Elon Musk. But Tesla made a lot of progress, convincing a lot of the legacy automakers to adopt their charging standard. SpaceX is dominating satellite launches now. We heard that they ended the year at about $175 billion valuation. They may spin off Starlink, which is powering satellite internet for a lot of the globe now. And we saw evidence of that over in the Ukrainian war, for example. His competitor to OpenAI, which he's called xAI, was raising $1 billion to compete directly with OpenAI. And then Neuralink, literally putting a computer inside the brains of humans. That's the vision to augment, intelligence. They had a valuation of about $5 billion overall. So I think those are the highlights from last year. That was a lot to unpack, but like I said, there was a lot of news last year, a lot of it around automotive, and much more exciting to come in 2024.
It is an exciting place to be, like we said earlier, Steve, and all this change is trickling its way down to the retailer and to the consumer as well. So here we are, end of January, looking out over the horizon, the next 11 months. Steve, when you look into your crystal ball, what are your predictions for the coming year in 2024? What do you see ahead for us?
Yeah, so I mean, we've already got a good head start into some of these trends, right? But I think that the EV pain, as I said, is just beginning. So demand kind of has slowed down at that exact moment that these legacy automakers are just getting their new models introduced. Automotive News says we're going to see a new 150 new EV makes and models launched over the next 2 years. So we're going to get flooded with new inventory right at that moment where we've kind of saturated all the early adopters of EVs overall. So what that's going to mean is like we're going to continue to see inventories backing up on dealers' lots. We're going to see incentives coming in over the top. And the incentives on EVs, I think, are going to get very dramatic and very large. It'll be a good time for a consumer to have a lot of choice and a lot of EV adoption in terms of like pricing pressure and discounting. But, I think this is going to be a big political issue as we get into the election cycle. Not the least of which is like the Inflation Reduction Act and all these tax incentives and whether we're spending them correctly, these restrictions on Chinese batteries, et cetera. And we've also seen with EVs, they're expensive to repair. So there's implications on fixed operations overall. I think that's going to trickle down to having a potentially higher vehicle insurance premiums for consumers on EVs versus ICE vehicles. And, in amongst all this and the volatility in pricing, it's going to be really hard to calculate residual values on what a used EV is going to be worth in like 2 to 3 years. So I think you munge all that together, and I think it's going to be more storm clouds on the horizon for EVs overall in 2024.
Steve, a quick follow-up.
Yeah,
Last time you were on, we talked a little bit about the charging network, and that has been in the news as well lately, the last 6 months or more. What do you see ahead on that?
Well, I mean, at this point, most, if not all, the legacy automakers have said we're going to just adopt the Tesla standard, which is dangerous, frankly, for them. Tesla has already made the investment to have 20,000 fast chargers out there across the U.S. and very reliable, much more reliable than these third-party chargers for the time being. So it kind of makes sense that the automakers have adopted this, but at the same time, they're putting all their eggs in the Tesla basket, and they're going to be literally having a GM or a Ford EV owner pull up to a Tesla charger and plug in, and Tesla will be able to effectively have visibility into every time you charge your vehicle at any one of their locations. And we saw late last year that I think over the Thanksgiving break, Tesla had said that, if you're going to make that last charge from 80% to 100%, they may charge you an extra $1 at their stations. Even for Tesla drivers, you could see a world where they start to charge non-Tesla drivers to try to throttle demand and supply, and it could get very dangerous.
Wow, interesting, fascinating.
Steve, you mentioned the customer expectations changing, and you're talking a little bit about some of the EV pieces in the customer experience. So what do you think is going to be the biggest change for the customer expectations going into 2024?
Yeah, so I think that the what I would call it the Amazon factor, right? So we saw this announcement last year. It's a very limited test. Hyundai announced that 18 of their dealers are going to be able to offer new vehicles for sale on Amazon, and it'll be a little bit of a clunky experience as it launches here this month. But I think that what we'll see is sort of like consumers. Now their expectations are going to be raised, and whether it's television commercials or whatever, a consumer is now going to walk into a non-Hyundai dealer and say, "Hey, I saw commercials for Amazon. I can buy a car on Amazon now." And the dealer is going to have to be prepared for that. The frontline salesperson is going to have to be prepared to say, "Well, we aren't participating, but this is why you should buy from us." Because I think there's a big threat that as they start to add more dealers, consumers may very well walk into a dealership, test drive a new car, but then say, well, if you're not offering it over Amazon, I'm just going to go home and I'm going to configure the same car and buy it over Amazon overall. So there's always been this threat that consumers were buying other products on Amazon, and they would transfer some of those expectations into auto. Well, now I think it's going to be more direct, and I would suspect over the course of 2024, we're going to see a lot more of the Hyundai dealers jump on board. And then the latter half of the year, we're probably going to see additional makes beyond Hyundai jump on board. Now, what implications that's going to have on fixed operations? I think it's only a matter of time, too, that if you bought a car off of Amazon, where do you get the car repaired? Well, if you had driveway delivery, I don't have an existing relationship with one of those Hyundai dealers. So there's going to also have to be an experience on there to drive the consumer into a service bay to get work done. And it'll be interesting to see how that's accommodated as well. But I think at the very least, Sarah, I think that dealers are going to have to be prepared that consumers are going to start seeing these ads, and they're going to have to equip their frontline salespeople to, be able to manage expectations as to why we're not selling on Amazon, or, why buy from me? Because maybe I can offer a better bundle of services than you could get on Amazon. But I think a lot of dealers may be flat-footed and not prepared for this change.
And Steve, while I know a lot of the logistics have yet to be worked out with that alliance, how do you see that affecting dealer margins as we look into 2024 into the year ahead?
Well, I think this is going to be one of the big news items. A year from now, when we're catching up, we're going to be shocked at how quickly dealer margins are going to come back down to earth. And I don't want to be a naysayer. We've already started to see margins start to drift down after COVID. I think this will be the year, and part of it will be fueled by these EVs. I mean, there can be brands where dealers are literally having to give away EVs and not make any margin, no front end gross at all on EVs, because there's going to be no demand for them. So I think dealers are going to be shocked at how quickly supply is going to come back, both on EVs and ICE vehicles. And suddenly it's like, I'm not making any money on the new vehicle sale. It's going to become that much important to retain those customers for fixed operations, because fixed operations is still going to be a good, profitable engine of growth for dealers overall. But I think it's going to be a bit of a shock for dealers that aren't prepared, how quickly profit margins are going to start to compress this year. I don't suspect by the end of the year they'll get back to pre-COVID margins, but we may get pretty close by the end of the year in terms of tracking into 2025 with dramatically lower margins than dealers have experienced the last couple of years.
How is all this going to play into dealer costs? And, what do you foresee ahead in that?
Well, I think this is one of the big areas of hope that I have, is that, dealers will start to really ruthlessly focus on their cost structures. And, some of the discipline that they learned through COVID, hopefully that they keep some of that discipline, the cost discipline. But I think that as an investor, this is where I get most excited, is whether we can find, partners out there, vendors that will be selling it to dealers to help them effectively make their people more productive, dramatically drive down turnover, because turnover is a big cost, as Sarah has articulated very, very many times in the past. And I think that helping a dealer scrutinize their entire cost structure and say, where am I spending money today, and how can I help my employees be more efficient? How can I drive costs out? And how can I make sure that even if revenues start to get a little lower and margins elsewhere, gross margins start to come down, I can more than counterbalance that by driving costs out. And I think we are going to see a new wave of vendors out there that really help dealers manage their understand their costs, manage their costs, drive down their costs. And those are the kinds of companies that we're looking at investing in out of our two funds.
Wow. Fascinating. Sarah, when we were in Detroit, I believe it was in early October. That's when I believe the UAW strike was going, full throttle at that time. And I know I've wondered, Steve, how do you see that, looking into the year ahead, talking about dealer costs? You're going to have all these new costs now, labor costs for the OEMs that'll be entered into the equation.
Yeah, I think mostly it's going to manifest in two areas. I think that the dealer's margin that the OEMs permit them to make on new cars is just going to shrink. And they're going to say, look, our costs are higher. We're going to, the difference between invoice and MSRP is just going to shrink over time. And, the difference the dealer is able to make in terms of profit on the front end of the vehicle. And I think you could see it in OEM parts margin too, because where else can the OEMs, start to pad in some additional profitability, is to say, look, our costs are going up. We're going to pass that along to the dealers. And maybe, you aren't going to make quite as much money when you're wholesaling OEM parts in the future as well. So I suspect those are immediate costs that the dealers will start to feel in 2024. And they're looking at, their P&L, and they're saying, wow, I'm not making as much money on a new car sale. And in my parts department, I'm starting to get squeezed a little bit too. I'm not making quite as much margin as I used to make in the parts department.
Sarah?
Well, Ted, this is, Steve has said so much already, and I just have another question, Steve. As you're talking about some of these pieces in the parts department and with service, there's been so many OEMs announcing all of these recalls. And so in the pre-owned market, there's a lot of stop sales that have happened. lately, and there's fixes that are on the horizon. But how do you see that impacting some of what is happening in service departments and dealerships in the beginning of this year?
Yeah, so I'll differentiate between new and used. I think the EV recalls are going to be a windfall for dealers, right? It may be challenging to actually have the equipment and the parts to be able to do these EV recalls, but I think especially if I'm I won't name any automakers, but one of the legacy automakers that's just getting into EVs, those first generation of EVs we've already seen have a lot of issues, right? So I think the recalls on those could be a windfall for dealers to fill up their service bays. I think to your point, Sarah, I mean, I think that navigating around selling used vehicles and understanding when you're taking a used vehicle on trade, is there an open recall? And am I going to be able to get that actually done quickly and expeditiously and cost effectively is going to continue to be a point of pressure for dealers. And there have to be new technologies out there that help dealers identify at the point of purchase of a used vehicle, does it have a recall? How quickly can I get the recall serviced? And how can I do that cost effectively? And I think that there are some innovative startups working in that area, but I think we're going to see more of that.
I think this past year was the year that we woke up to the fact that artificial intelligence is now here in the retail automotive industry. Steve, what do you see ahead for AI?
Well, I think we're going to start to see, it'll be interesting going into NADA here in a week or so to see just how much AI is being sold by different vendors, right? I assume that almost every booth we're going to go to will have some AI, marketing, and we'll see sort of how much value it can deliver to dealers. But I think, by the end of the year, we're going to start to see just AI become normal course in product development in these vendors. And I would almost call it like invisible AI. AI is going to start to become just part of our daily life, right? Kind of like if you're writing a document now and you're using spell check or grammar check, is this going to be woven into every single product that we've got? So I think it'll be great for dealers, because I think that whether you've got somebody in the BDC who's reaching out to a consumer, and just the correction and just augmenting that frontline employee's intelligence, whether it's in a service bay and ensuring that the technician's smarter at diagnosing the issue quicker, or actually like making sure the parts are in stock real time, et cetera. So I think we're going to start to see like AI probably the first half of the year being separately discussed modules that will be upsold to dealers. I think by the end of the year, we're going to start to see AI just get woven into the very fabric of all the solutions out there. At the end of the day, it circles back to like talking about taking out costs, right? If all of our employees are smarter and can be more efficient because AI is augmenting their intelligence and helping short circuit the daily routine tasks that they do, I think it's going to be a better world and a more profitable world for dealers overall.
All right, Steve, a big prognostication. Here we are, end of January, looking into your crystal ball. What do you see ahead, or what do you think will be the biggest surprise in the retail auto industry in 2024?
Yeah, so I think it comes back to margins, right? I think we're going to exit this year just shocked at how quickly margins have started to come down. I wouldn't say collapse. I don't think we're going to be at pre-COVID norms, but we're going to have line of sight by the end of the year. So if a dealer isn't sort of saying, if a dealer's living in a bubble and saying, oh no, margins are going to continue to be awesome, I would say, well, maybe it's time to prick that bubble and start to like be more realistic around like what the latter half of the year might look like, and just be prepared. If the margins are still great this year, awesome. Everyone can continue to ride that wave. But if margins start to come down dramatically and you're not ready, I think shame on you. Shame on you.
Well, fascinating, Sarah.
Steve, this has been a lot of really amazing information. And Ted, we just talked about all the changes, all the predictions, but a lot of people are looking at technology companies and they're thinking, all right, if I'm in this investment climate, there's a lot going on. So Steve, if you're looking at the investment climate for early stage automotive technology companies, what is the climate looking like today?
Well, it's a great question, and it has been very challenging, right? Even for non-automotive technology companies that are early stage, it's been hard to raise money, et cetera. And we're starting to see that loosen up now, coming through the first month of this year. I think what we'll see is that continue to get better for entrepreneurs who are out there who are looking to raise their first money or raise a subsequent round of money. Is this going to become an easier environment for folks overall? We're investing in very early stage companies out of 2 funds, and we've made 27 investments so far over the last 3 years. And we continue to see a good flow of very innovative companies. There goes the cat. And innovative companies that are looking at solving these big issues within automotive technology. And we don't see any shortage of really innovative companies, great entrepreneurs, investable companies. But I think it's just going to become a much easier environment if you're an entrepreneur out there to raise money. And that's a breath of fresh air, I think, compared to what's been the case the last couple of years.
And Steve, we have some mutual friends on the Fixed Ops Roundtable who've seen great benefit of working with you at Automotive Ventures. So congratulations to you on the success that you are having with those companies.
No, thanks very much. And if anyone is interested, we have an investment club also, and I think we've done 6 deals over the course of the last 12 months. So if you're interested in investing directly, just make sure that you reach out to me, and we can get you subscribed to that deal flow as well. And we are trying to find really good, high quality companies for our investment club members to invest in.
All right. Fascinating information. Sarah, time well spent, and I took a lot of notes. I don't know about you.
Oh yes, so many takeaways for us looking into 2024.
So Steve Greenfield, great honor to have you with us. Steve is the general partner at Automotive Ventures, also the author of the book, The Future of Automotive Retail, easy to find on social media, on LinkedIn. He's everywhere. And Steve, again, congratulations to you on behalf of the Fixed Ops Roundtable for all you do for our industry.
No, Ted, thanks for having me. Sarah, great to catch up with you as well. And best of luck for the remainder of the year.
Great. Steve Greenfield, everybody, from Automotive Ventures, here today with us at the Fixed Ops Roundtable.